there, AP Environmental Science class. All right, welcome back to my lecture on Chapter 8, the human population. We're moving on now to 8.3 here, which is how does a population's age structure affect its growth and decline? So what are we talking about here? Well, an age structure is the number and percentages of male and females in young, middle, and older groups in a population. And this is an important factor in determining how fast a population grows or declines. So before we even get into it, you can probably in your mind begin to kind of see how this is going to affect if you have a large number of young males and females in a population. Well, then obviously your population is most likely going to grow or at a faster rate than, let's say, if you have a large group of older people and let's say less younger people, then your population is probably going to grow at a slower rate or maybe even decline. So that's what we're going to look at over the next couple of slides. So there are, again, these certain age structures that we look at. The first is called the pre-reproductive age structure or age category, and that's going to be ages 0 to 14 years of age. The reproductive age structure category, that's from 15 years of age to 44 years of age. And then the post-reproductive category would be anyone ages 45 or older. Country with large percentages of people younger than age 15, like I just said, will experience rapid population growth, while the opposite would occur, obviously, if you have a large percentage of people in the post-reproductive phase. Then you're going to have your population growth either slow or maybe even go down or decline, right? Global population of seniors expected to triple between 2015 and 2050. And again, that's going to potentially cause, especially in some countries, which we're going to explore in just a bit, the population to actually decline. So these are what we call these age structure pyramids. All right, you will have to understand how to read them for the AP exam. So let's take a look at what we're looking at here. So again, the one on the left here is a population that is expanding rapidly. And what you can see is the base of the pyramid, which is the pre-reproductive folks, ages 0 to 14, is greater, right? And then as you go up the pyramid gets smaller and smaller to the top. That type of age structure pyramid is going to cause population to expand rapidly. And what countries have this type of age structure? Guatemala, Niger, Saudi Arabia, for instance, okay? So again, when you see an age structure pyramid where the base is large and then it gradually gets smaller up to the top, that's going to be one where the population will expand rapidly. You'll notice the next one, which is the United States, Thailand, and China. This is when your population is expanding slowly. So you'll notice not as many pre-reproductive folks as we have in the expanding rapidly pyramid. So it's a little smaller here. You have a little more in the way of older reproductive and post-reproductive folks. You'll notice the yellow and blue here as we go up the pyramid, a little bit larger than over in the expanding rapidly pyramid here. And again, this is just telling us that in this case, our age is almost evenly distributed between the post-reproductive, the reproductive, and the pre-reproductive stages. And so here, your population is just going to expand slowly. You'll notice stable population, that's Russia, Italy, and Greece, kind of looks like this. And in here, you basically don't have a pyramid. It almost looks like a perfect rectangle, right, going up until the very, very top with your oldest people, obviously, then begins to come to a little bit of a point here. But what basically this is saying is that you have the same amount of people in the pre-reproductive, the reproductive, and the post-reproductive age categories, and therefore your population is staying kind of stable. A declining population, so Japan, Bulgaria, Hungary have declining populations, and what you'll notice is the opposite of the expanding rapidly pyramid. In the declining pyramid, it's almost like a upside down pyramid, right? Where you have the largest amount of folks in the post-reproductive stage and the least amount of folks in the pre-reproductive phase. So you can see what happens as these older folks die out or die off, right? You don't have as many young people compared to especially the expanding rapidly pyramid here. You don't have as many young people in Japan, Bulgaria, and Hungary to pick up the pace. So obviously, again, the total fertility rate going to be under that 2.1 for this type of pyramid here, and that means your population will decline because again, you don't have as many young people coming up, I guess through the vines or coming up, growing up to that reproductive age to then produce more offspring. So definitely understand how to read these pyramids. I have seen them on many tests. Again, expanding rapidly, you're going to have a large base, a lot of pre-reproductive folks, and then a smaller at the top with the post-reproductive folks. Expanding slowly, stable, kind of almost equal all the way up and down. Obviously expanding slowly, a little bit wider at the base, stable, kind of the same, and then declining, obviously, almost an upside down pyramid where you have more people in the post-reproductive phase and less folks in the pre-reproductive phase. All right. So again, a lot of this is self-intuitive, but just understand kind of what you're seeing with these age structure pyramids and exactly how to read them. So, case study, the American baby boom, 79 million people added from 1946 to 1964. We kind of looked at a graph of this in my previous lecture on this chapter. It affected politics and economics during that time frame. Now those folks are becoming senior citizens. These are my parents, your grandparents, all right? And they're calling this the graying of America because all of these folks in that baby boom now are beginning to get into that post-reproductive age or even greater, towards the end of that post reproductive phase. So the millennia generation, Americans born since 1980, that's you, that's almost me. I was born in 1975, so it's almost me, but it's not. Now the largest generation of folks living in the United States. So once again, here are some of these age structures, age pyramids. And again, you can kind of look at this, 1955, 1985, 2015, and then what we expect in 2035. And again, what you're seeing is that you'll notice that the pyramid kind of changes, all right? This is showing where these people were during the baby boom. So in 1955, they were mainly here, right? They were very young, under the age of 10. Okay, and it was a large population. Now that population in 1980s was kind of in the middle here, but you'll notice the spike, right? It's lower in the pre-reproductive, lower in the post-reproductive, but in the 1985, those baby boomers were in the reproductive phase, and it was a bigger, little bit bigger of a piece of the pyramid in there, right? 2015, kind of now, obviously 5 years ago, but kind of now, you'll notice these baby boomers are now rising up into the post-reproductive phase. And then by 2035, you'll notice most of them are going to be 70, 80 plus years old. But again, a lot of them at the top. So this is kind of showing how the population grew between 1955 and 1985 as these baby boomers were in the reproductive phase. But now as they're heading into the post-reproductive phase, and we don't see as many folks coming up, there's not as many in the pre-reproductive phase as, let's say, 1955. And this is why here in the United States, our population is kind of stable right around that total fertility rate of 2.1, which is the replacement for fertility rate needed to kind of keep the population stable. All right, so again, just kind of understand how to read these charts. And again, this is again just another kind of chart that basically showed what we were just looking at, 1950, 2010, 2050. And again, you'll notice as we go up in time here, in 1950, we had a nice age structure pyramid where we had a lot at the bottom, pre-reproductive, not as much as the top, post-reproductive, and that showed a lot of population growth. And remember the chart I showed you in the previous lecture that showed the population growth really raising during the 40s, 50s, and 60s. But now as we head through 2010, a couple of years ago, obviously, and we head up to 2050, you'll notice how we're getting the wider at the top, towards the top of the pyramid, meaning the reproductive or even into the post-reproductive phase. There's a category, there's more folks up there. And as a result, this is showing that our population goes from expanding rapidly in the dark blue to kind of, not expanding as rapidly to now almost in the lightest blue, getting to more of that stable kind of age structure pyramid look, okay, with, again, more potentially at the top than at the bottom, kind of the upside down pyramid. So again, just understand how to read these. They're very, you get a lot of information out of them. Again, you'll notice this was the males on the left, females on the right, but again, kind of showing that same structure that we talked about in these age pyramids, okay? Aging populations can decline rapidly. Slow decline is generally manageable. Rapid decline leads to economic problems. So proportionally fewer young people working, and that could lead to labor shortages. So basically, if the population in your country is declining, like some countries like Japan, Germany, Bulgaria, Italy, Hungary, Romania, Cuba, Portugal, for instance, if the slow decline is happening, that's okay. But if you have a rapid decline in population, well, then what's happening? Think of your pyramid. Too many folks in the post-reproductive, not as many folks in the pre-reproductive, and those are your younger folks. So you basically have less younger folks to keep working, and that could cause labor shortages, which could also cause an issue with, let's say, social security, right? Social security is people, me working, paying into social security so that the older generation can use that money to have in their retirement. Well, what happens if there's not enough young people working? Well, that screws up the economy because now not as many people are paying into that social security, and so it may run out for the people who are in the post-reproductive phase. So again, we don't want to see populations decline rapidly. What we're trying to do is kind of stabilize population. So here again, just more problems with a rapid population decline can threaten the economic growth, labor shortages, kind of what I just said, less government revenue. Again, that's the social security, that's taxes with fewer workers. Again, you got fewer workers, you have to increase taxes, right? If you need the same amount of money. Less entrepreneurship and less new business formation, less likelihood for new technology, right? Because it's the young folks that come into the workforce and come up with these new ideas. Well, if you don't have as many young folks, if your population is declining rapidly and you have, again, smaller pre-reproductive than post-reproductive folks, you're going to have issues here, all right? Increasing public deficits to fund higher pension and healthcare costs, just like I was talking about. And again, pensions like Social Security may be cut and retirement age may have to be increased. So again, rapidly declining populations, not what we want. We're trying to stabilize. So how can we slow human population growth? So controversy on whether population growth needs to slow. Again, these are kind of what we talk about, the ethical parts of this. Do you really tell people you can't have these many kids like they did in China when they had the one and two child rule? Is that ethical? These are the questions that we have to answer. So some ways to slow human population growth is to reduce poverty through economic development, elevate the status of women, we talked about that, and encourage family planning, okay? Things that, especially in underdeveloped nations where the population is still growing at a rapid pace, you don't have this type of education. So again, these are just ways that we can ethically slow human population growth without passing laws to tell people how many children they are allowed to have. If we educate people, especially women, it is definitely a way that we can slow population growth. So here are just some, again, a chart just kind of showing how these four stages, so we talked about the age structure pyramid on the bottom. Now on the top, we're going to link that to kind of your economics or what's going on in your country. So you'll notice the pre-industrial phase, which is stage 1, population grows very slowly because of a high birth rate, no to compensate for a high infant mortality rate and a high death rate. So you'll notice in stage 1, you're kind of getting population grows, but it's maybe not growing as fast because you have a lot of people being born, but you also have a lot of people dying off early because you're pre-industrial. So this would be kind of, think about like the 1700s or the 1600s here in the US. We weren't industrial, okay? So our population was growing. We had a high birth rate, but we also had a high death rate, okay? And that's what you're kind of seeing right here. You're seeing total population. Red is birth rate. Blue is death rate. And again, the birth rate, death rate were kind of equal. And so your population increased, but not that much. Then you go to stage 2, which is called the transitional stage. And here is when your population begins to grow very rapidly. All right. So this is where now you begin to see the age structure pyramid down here beginning to really take shape. And why? Because the birth rates are still high, but the death rates drop because of improved food production and health. So think about the late 1800s to the early 1900s here in the US. We started to get better medicine. We started to get better sanitation, right? Running water, public toilets. Remember that graph I showed you in the lesson, the first lesson on this chapter 8, that kind of showed in the 1900s how we got electricity and running water and all these things into people's homes. So that, and in addition, food production, agriculture, late 1800s or 1900s, okay, it became we're mass producing now food. So there's plenty of food. There's medicine getting better. We're understanding diseases better. And so what happens in the transitional stage 2 is that your population grows very rapidly because we're still having the high birth rate that you had in the pre-industrial stage 1, but the difference is your death rate is dropping. So now you're still getting a lot of population growth, but your death rate is coming down, and that is rapidly increasing your population. And that's what you're seeing down here, okay? Birth rate kind of stays the same, but look at the death rate, drops dramatically in the transitional in that stage 2, and that causes the total population to increase very rapidly. So this would be what was occurring in the US again in the late 18 into the early parts of last century, the 20th century, the 1900s. We saw that huge population boom. And then what happens? Then we get to stage 3, which is called the industrial stage. Here, population growth slows as both birth and death rates drop because of improved food production, health, and education. So what happens in stage 3 is that now we've been in this, now we're in the industrial phase. Now women are getting educated. Women are going to work, okay, with men as well. And this now slows the birth rate. So look what happens to the birth rate. So the death rate stays low now in the industrial. We've saved all those people in the transitional phase by getting better medicine, better sanitation, etc. So the death rate stays the same, but now your birth rate comes down, okay? Because this is where, again, you educate your female population. People are out working. They have careers, both men and women, and so they don't want as many kids per se. And so again, your birth rate goes down, and this causes your population growth to kind of slow. This is kind of where we are in the U.S. kind of right now. All right, we're kind of heading from stage 3 to stage 4, but we're kind of in a stage 3 now, the industrial. What happens in the post-industrial stage 4? This is like Japan, okay, or Bulgaria. What's going on there is that population growth levels off and then declines as birth rate equals and then falls below the death rate. So you'll notice here your death rate, again, the death rate pretty much stays the same from late in stage 2 transitional all the way through stage 4, but it's that birth rate now that continues to drop. And why? A couple of reasons why. Obviously, the first would be that you have people in the workforce, people working, so families are not having as many kids. And then what happens later on is because of this, you'll notice this type of age pyramid in the post-industrial, you don't have as many younger folks coming up through the pipeline, and so your birth rate continues to drop because there's not as many people in the reproductive phase, and so your population, which is the green arrow here, begins to decline. So just understand these 4 phases, very important, okay? Pre-industrial, transitional, industrial, and post-industrial, and just again, remember and understand what's happening. Pre-industrial, high birth rate, but a high death rate, so your population growing very slowly. Transitional, still that high birth rate, but now with better medicine, better technology, sanitation, your death rate comes down, so your population explodes. Then we get into stage 3, the industrial. Now the population is slowing as, again, you still have a low death rate, but the birth rate begins to decline as, again, people are educated. More and more families have 2 people working, so they don't have as many children. And then in the post-industrial, you end up getting your death rate staying the same, but your birth rate declines because you don't have as many people, younger folks coming up through the pipeline from the pre-reproductive to the reproductive phase, and therefore your population will either level off and then actually begin to decline. All right, so again, just kind of understand those those four phases and what they mean for population growth or decline. Economic development, a demographic transition. As countries become industrialized, poverty declines. All right. And that's why, again, we see that birth rate begin to decline in stage 3 in the industrial phase. And that means your populations then tend to grow more slowly. Threats to making a demographic transition. And that's what those stages were all about. If I didn't make that clear, they're called demographic transition. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. Threats to making that transition. So threats from going from stage 1 to 2, from 2 to 3 to 3 to 4. Extreme poverty and war can threaten that. And of course, environmental degradation and resource depletion can also affect that as well. Tough to get to the industrial phase if you have no resources to actually use. So again, things that can prohibit us or prohibit societies from going through those demographic transitions from stage 1 to stage 2, pre-industrial, stage 3 industrial, and then the post-industrial stage 4. Again, we're going to talk about educating and empowering women. I've been saying it a bunch. This is a way to keep your population, or at least to lower the birth rates in some of these underdeveloped countries that still have your very high birth rate. Women will have fewer children if they're educated, if they're able to earn an income, and if society does not suppress their rights. So women do most of the domestic work and childcare. They provide unpaid health care, and they have fewer rights and educational opportunities than men. This needs to change, okay? And I spoke about this in other lessons. I spoke about it in the previous lesson on this in this chapter 8. I'm speaking about it now. In these underdeveloped countries, they're in that phase 2. Right? They're in that transitional phase. They're trying to get to industrial. So their birth rates are still very high. Their death rates have come down because of medicine and sanitation. But a lot of these underdeveloped countries still in that stage 2. And in order to get to that stage 3, in order to get the population to begin to stabilize, you need to decrease the birth rate. And to do that, you need to empower women, educate them, let them have their own rights, have them have their own dreams, their own ideas of what they want to do and how they want to contribute to society. Then they go out, they earn income. Doesn't mean they don't have children, but instead of having 5 or 6 children, they may have 1 or 2 children. And again, that 2.1, that's that replacement to total fertility rate, right? 2.1 is what we want to be at in order to keep the population stable. Okay, so it's all about, at this point, empowering women, especially in those third world, those developing nations. A young lady like this should not be carrying twigs on her back anymore. She should be working at a computer or doing something technological or more advanced, or again, just using her mind more. And if she uses her mind more, then the idea is that birth rate will come down. And again, it's come down in the developed nations like the U.S., like the European Union. And so we know it works. We know educating women will help decrease the large population growth, the population boom that we're still experiencing in many parts of the globe. Family planning, again, important. Education, okay? These underdeveloped nations, they don't understand about this. So we need to educate them to reduce unintended pregnancies, births, and abortions, the better maternal and child health care. Again, if they know their offspring is going to make it to that reproductive phase, then guess what? They're not going to continue to have children. Again, reduce that rate of infant mortality. And again, financial benefits from having fewer children. Problems, lack of access to voluntary contraceptive and child marriage customs. Again, we spoke about this in the previous lecture. Many of our cultures, cultures have cultures where you get married very young to have children. Again, these are some of the problems when it comes to this family planning. So just another case study, population growth in India, population 1.31 billion in 2015. Problems, poverty, malnutrition, and environmental degradation is occurring. Causes, most poor couples want many children, right? So they also have a bias towards having male children because they think it's going to increase the amount of money that they can get in. Only 40% of couples use modern birth control methods in India. Again, a lot because of education and just not having access to these things, this family planning. So again, it's something that we have to take a look at. Again, you'll notice India 2010 to what India may look like in 2035. You'll notice the male versus female. And again, what you're noticing is that you're having, especially in 2010, 10 years ago, that's your age structure pyramid that shows rapid growth, right? Lot in the pre-reproductive phase, a lot of men and women down here, not as many up in the post-reproductive phase. And then you notice what's going to happen in 2035. All those folks born are going to now be rising into the reproductive phase here, which means the population is going to continue to expand, continue to increase. So again, something that we're watching. And unfortunately, it leads to poverty. It leads to scenes like this. And this is not what we want, guys. This is what we're trying to prevent around the world. And again, education and access to family planning in these underdeveloped nations, key to getting this population boom under control. Same thing in China. Okay, here's another case study. So a bunch of case studies in this chapter. Make sure to understand them. World's most populous country. Threat of mass starvation in the 1960s. So what do? They established a strict family planning and birth control program in 1978. That actually worked. It reduced the number of children born per woman from 3 to 1.7, which is actually below the total fertility replacement rate. And their TFR was already declining before 78 due to increased education and employment opportunities for women. So the point is, they may not have needed to establish a strict family planning and birth control program because their TFRs were already coming down because of what was going on. They were going from the transition, stage 2, to the industrial phase, stage 3, and women were getting educated and they had more employment opportunities. So the TFR was actually coming down on its own. They didn't need these laws, this strict family planning and birth control. So what did they have? They had this one-child policy and basically said you could only have one child. So what are negative effects? Well, preference for male children resulted in skewed population. There were too few females. Average population age increasing at one of the fastest rates ever recorded because what happened? They weren't putting as much folks back into that pre-reproductive phase. So, they kind of did it, they did it artificially, and that really messed up the age structure pyramid in China. By 2030, likely too few young workers to support the aging population because, again, it was a rapid decline. So in 2015, the Chinese realized this, and they replaced the one-child policy with a two-child policy, which gets you closer to that 2.1 replacement level total fertility rate, which again helps to stabilize the population. So it didn't really work in China. It worked. It worked too well, and they had a rapidly declining population in China, which had too many negative effects. So they stepped in and they replaced the one-child policy with two-child. But again, most likely, the point of this is you really don't need to do this if you just educate, especially women, and give women opportunities to live their life, to explore careers. It just naturally you're going to see that TFR come down. Again, this just going to picture what you're seeing. You're seeing a lot of people living great in China in the background, and yet in the foreground you have a shanty town because there are just too many people. And again, here are some of these this structure pyramids showing. You'll notice 2010. Where do you have the large amount of folks? Well, they're right here in the middle in the reproductive phase. And so it's going to show that going on into 2035, those people are now rising into the post-reproductive phase, not leaving as many folks down here in the pre-reproductive phase. And this, of course, is a pyramid that could lead to potentially declining population. So that's what China is concerned about. And again, that's why they went from a one-child to a two-child policy in 2015. But again, the argument is their TFRs were coming down anyways because of the career and the education of women in China. And so really, do you need laws? I would say no. U.S., we don't have a law, and we're right around that 2.1 TFR. Because why? Because young ladies in America have all the opportunities that young men have. Okay, and the same thing goes for Europe and the developed countries. So it works, and we need to help out our underdeveloped countries to kind of understand and realize this. All right? Last couple of slides here. So the big ideas: human population is growing rapidly, may soon bump up against environmental limits, the carrying capacity of the earth. Combination of population growth and increasing rate of resource use per person is expanding the human ecological footprint. And of course, this strains the earth's natural capital. We can slow human population growth by reducing poverty, elevating the status of women, and encouraging family planning. So try it all together: world population growth and sustainability. Many believe exponential growth is unsustainable in the long run, which I agree. Employing solar and other renewable technologies can help reduce the pollution and the emissions of climate changing gases. So again, we can use our technology to increase the carrying capacity of Earth. That will help. Reuse and recycle materials will help do that. And of course, focus on preserving our biodiversity, of course, will help keep that, or help raise that carrying capacity, which of course would help sustain the population that is on planet Earth. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this lesson on Chapter 8, the human population. And once again, as always, thanks for listening.